The morning of September 11th, 2001 dawned like any other in America, but by midday the nation, and indeed the world, would be irrevocably changed. Terrorists, driven by a hatred of the West, had struck at the heart of American power and prestige. 19 men, affiliated with the extremist group Al-Qaeda, hijacked 4 commercial airplanes. Their targets, symbols of American might. 2 planes slammed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center in New York City. The collapse of the towers, shown live on television screens around the globe, sent shockwaves far beyond ground zero. A 3rd plane hit the Pentagon, headquarters of the US military just outside Washington, D.C. The 4th plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania after passengers bravely resisted the hijackers. To understand the rise of Al-Qaeda, one must look back to the 1980s, a decade marked by significant geopolitical shifts and conflicts that would shape the modern world. The Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 sparked a brutal conflict that would last for a decade. This invasion was part of the larger Cold War struggle between the Soviet Union and the United States, each vying for global influence and power. The US, eager to counter Soviet expansionism and prevent the spread of communism, poured money and weapons into the hands of the Afghan Mujahideen. These Islamic fighters, driven by a mix of nationalism and religious fervor, resisted the Soviet invasion with fierce determination. Among the many fighters who joined the Mujahideen was a young Saudi named Osama bin Laden. He was not just any fighter, he came from a background that afforded him significant resources and influence. Bin Laden, scion of a wealthy family with deep ties to the Saudi elite, had embraced a radical interpretation of Islam. His wealth and connections allowed him to play a pivotal role in the Afghan resistance. He saw the Soviet occupation as a holy war, a jihad against Islam itself. This perspective was shared by many of his fellow fighters who believed they were defending their faith and their homeland from an atheist invader. Bin Laden formed Al-Qaeda, meaning the base in Arabic, to support the Afghan resistance. Initially, Al-Qaeda served as a logistical network providing funding, training and resources to the Mujahideen. The group attracted recruits from across the Muslim world, united by their desire to expel the Soviets and establish an Islamic state in Afghanistan. These fighters came from diverse backgrounds, but were bonded by a common cause and a shared ideology. The Soviet withdrawal from Afghanistan in 1989 was a victory for the Mujahideen, but it also left a void. The country was devastated by years of war, and the various factions that had united against the Soviets began to turn on each other. Al-Qaeda, emboldened by its success in Afghanistan, turned its attention to new targets. Bin Laden and his followers viewed the United States as the primary obstacle to their ultimate goal, the establishment of a global Islamic caliphate. They believed that by attacking American interests, they could weaken the US and inspire Muslims worldwide to join their cause. Throughout the 1990s, Al-Qaeda carried out a series of attacks against US targets, including the bombings of American embassies in Africa and the attack on the USS Cole. These actions culminated in the devastating attacks on September 11, 2001, which brought Al-Qaeda to the forefront of global attention and led to the US-led War on Terror. The rise of Al-Qaeda and its subsequent actions have had a profound impact on global politics and security. The group's ideology and tactics have inspired numerous other terrorist organizations, leading to ongoing conflicts and a continuous struggle against extremism worldwide. Understanding the genesis of Al-Qaeda is crucial to comprehending the complexities of modern terrorism and the challenges faced by the international community in combating it. Al-Qaeda's worldview is rooted in a distorted and extremist interpretation of Sunni Islam. This interpretation is not representative of the broader Muslim community, but rather a radical fringe that seeks to justify violence and terror in the name of religion. They manipulate religious texts to serve their agenda, creating a narrative of perpetual conflict and martyrdom. The group believes that the West, led by the United States, is engaged in a war against Islam. This belief is not based on any concrete evidence, but is rather a constructed narrative designed to rally support and justify their actions. They portray the West as an existential threat to Islam, aiming to create a sense of urgency and fear among their followers. This belief is fueled by a number of grievances, real and perceived US support for Israel, which they view as an occupying force in Palestinian territories, and the broader Western involvement in Middle Eastern politics. These grievances are often exaggerated or taken out of context to fit their narrative of oppression and victimhood. The presence of American troops in Saudi Arabia, the birthplace of Islam and home to its two holiest sites, is seen as a direct affront to their religious sensibilities. This presence is portrayed as an occupation and a desecration, further fueling their anti-Western sentiment. They also point to the perceived economic and cultural exploitation of Muslim countries by the West. The disparity in wealth and the influence of Western culture are seen as evidence of a broader agenda to undermine and control Muslim societies. This exploitation narrative is used to stoke resentment and anger among those who feel left behind by globalization. Bin Laden articulated these grievances in a series of pronouncements, calling on Muslims to rise up against the West. His speeches and writings were filled with references to historical injustices and calls for revenge, painting a picture of a global struggle between Islam and its enemies. He declared jihad against the United States, urging attacks on American interests, both at home and abroad. This declaration was a call to arms for his followers, legitimizing acts of terror as a form of religious duty and resistance. Al-Qaeda's ideology found resonance among a small but significant segment of the Muslim population. These individuals, often marginalized or disillusioned, found a sense of purpose and belonging in the group's narrative. The promise of martyrdom and the allure of fighting for a greater cause attracted many to their ranks. The group's message, disseminated through pamphlets, audio tapes, and later the internet, appealed to those who felt marginalized, dispossessed, or angered by Western policies. The internet, in particular, became a powerful tool for spreading their ideology, allowing them to reach a global audience and recruit new members from around the world. Through sophisticated propaganda, they were able to create a sense of community and shared purpose among their followers, further entrenching their extremist views. Section 4, The American Response, a Nation at War with Terror. The 9/11 attacks stunned America, leaving an indelible mark on the nation's psyche. The nation had never experienced such a devastating attack on its own soil, and the images of destruction and loss were seared into the collective memory. The immediate response was one of shock, grief, and anger. Across the country, people gathered in vigils, holding candles and comforting one another in a time of unprecedented sorrow. President George W. Bush declared a war on terror, vowing to hunt down those responsible and prevent future attacks. His speeches galvanized the nation, calling for unity and resilience in the face of terror. The Bush administration launched two major military interventions: the invasion of Afghanistan in 2001, aimed at dismantling the Al-Qaeda network that had orchestrated the attacks, and the invasion of Iraq in 2003, which was justified by the administration on the grounds of eliminating weapons of mass destruction and curbing the influence of Saddam Hussein. The stated goal in Afghanistan was to dismantle Al-Qaeda, which was being sheltered by the Taliban regime. The rugged terrain and elusive enemy made the mission challenging and prolonged. The Iraq War, however, was more controversial. It sparked widespread protests and divided opinions both domestically and internationally. The Bush administration argued that Saddam Hussein's regime possessed weapons of mass destruction and had links to Al-Qaeda. These claims were used to justify the invasion, despite significant skepticism and opposition. These claims proved to be false, but the war nonetheless diverted resources and attention away from the fight against Al-Qaeda. The aftermath of the Iraq War saw a destabilized region and a prolonged US military presence, raising questions about the true cost of the conflict. In Afghanistan, efforts to rebuild the nation and establish a stable government were met with mixed success. US soldiers worked alongside Afghan civilians, striving to create a safer and more prosperous future. The global reaction to the US war on terror was varied, with some nations supporting the efforts while others criticized the approach and its consequences. Anti-war demonstrations became a common sight, reflecting the deep divisions over US foreign policy. As the years passed, the memory of 9/11 remained a powerful reminder of the vulnerability and resilience of the American people. Memorials and moments of silence honored the victims and the heroes who emerged in the aftermath of the attacks. The long and arduous journey of the war on terror saw many US troops returning home, reuniting with their families and communities. Their sacrifices and service were recognized and honored, even as the nation continued to grapple with the complex legacy of the conflict. Through it all, the American spirit of resilience and determination shone brightly, a testament to the nation's enduring strength in the face of adversity. Section 5. The unraveling factors leading to Al-Qaeda's decline. In the years after 9/11, Al-Qaeda suffered a series of setbacks. The US-led military campaigns in Afghanistan and Iraq, while costly and controversial, did degrade the group's operational capabilities. The killing of Osama bin Laden by US forces in 2011 was a major blow to Al-Qaeda's morale and prestige. The rise of the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, a more brutal and media-savvy jihadist group, further eroded Al-Qaeda's standing. ISIS's territorial gains in Iraq and Syria and its ability to inspire attacks around the world overshadowed Al-Qaeda's message. Al-Qaeda's rigid ideology and its focus on attacking the West also alienated potential recruits. The group's failure to provide basic services and governance in areas it controlled further diminished its appeal. Section 6. A legacy of fear and insecurity, Al-Qaeda's enduring impact. While Al-Qaeda is a shadow of its former self, its legacy continues to haunt the world. The group's attacks on 9/11 fundamentally reshaped the global security landscape, ushering in an era of heightened security measures, mass surveillance, and the erosion of civil liberties. Al-Qaeda's ideology has also inspired a new generation of jihadist groups, from Boko Haram in Nigeria to Al-Shabaab in Somalia. These groups, while often operating independently, share Al-Qaeda's hatred of the West and its goal of establishing Islamic rule. The fight against terrorism has become a defining feature of the 21st century. The threat posed by Al-Qaeda and its ideological offspring is likely to persist for years to come, demanding a sustained and multifaceted response from the international community.